What's going on, everyone? My name is Michael. Some of you know me as Magic Mike, and on today's episode we're going to replace the water pump on this 2002 Mercedes-Benz SLK 32 AMG. One preface that I always want to make before I do any of these videos is that there's more than one way to get these jobs done. There's more than one tool that can usually accomplish the same task. Let's get started. Alright, so these are the tools that I'll be using to get the water pump replaced. I've got a flathead screwdriver right here. This will be for undoing the drain plug on the radiator. This is actually a fan belt tool, but in this case what I'm going to be using it for is to mount on the 10mm bolts that hold the water pump pulley in place. This will hold those, and that will allow me to release each bolt from the pulley and then remove it from the water pump itself. I've got a T50, a T45, a little 3/8 extension. I've got a 14mm for one of the idler pulleys. I've got a 7mm for a hose clamp, 10mm for the bolts on the water pump pulley itself. I have an E12, an E11, an E10, and an E7, all for different bolts that are going to be on the water pump housing. I've also got a couple of 3/8 ratchets. I've got a couple of 1/4-inch ratchets. I've got a set of pliers. I've got a couple of 1/4-inch extensions and a conversion because I will be using the torque wrench, because I've got this adapter because I will be using the torque wrench to torque each of those bolts. I've also got these two tools. These are for removing hoses that have been stuck. So they're rounded at the edge as to not puncture the hoses, but that way I can get underneath it and help to release it. And I've also got my speed ratchet. So let's dive into it. First, I'm going to go ahead and drain the coolant. We're going to pull off this upper guide pulley, that way we can get this belt off. We're going to spin each of the bearings, see how everything sounds. In order to remove this upper guide pulley, I need to remove these hoses connected to these vacuum actuators. In order to do that, there's a bolt here and a bolt here. Alright, so we've got our serpentine belt off. Looks to be in good condition. I'm not seeing any cracks. And next, we're going to go ahead and we're going to spin each of these pulleys, starting with the supercharger pulley. So it spins well, but it is making some noise. I will need to look into getting that bearing replaced. Upper idler, nice and quiet, spins really nice. Water pump. Definitely making a little bit of noise. The other thing, there is a little bit of play in that water pump. I went ahead and I ordered a new one. I'm gonna go ahead and get that swapped out. Let's check the alternator. Nice and quiet. Sounds good. Nope, tensioner bearing. Definitely has some wobble in it and is making a bit of noise, so that will need to be replaced. Power steering pump. I'm not going to be able to get that one to spin very fast just by hand. Not hearing any unusual noises. AC compressor. Can't get that one going very fast, but spins freely. Not making a whole lot of noise. So that works pretty well. So I will need to get a tensioner ordered. I have a water pump. And I will need to find out about replacing this supercharger pulley bearing. I know you can replace just the bearing. I just have to make sure I get the correct one, so I'll be looking into that. The coolant has been drained. I'm going to go ahead and remove my upper radiator hose. I'm going to remove this idler pulley. I will need to remove this bracket. And then I'll pull off the 4 bolts holding on the water pump pulley itself. I got my pulley off, I got the bracket out of the way, I've got this upper radiator hose off. Next I'm going to need to do this cooler hose right here, get that off. And I'm also going to need to get off this hose right here. This hose right here. But that will come off with my water pump. Alright, so we've got our lower radiator hoses off. Last, we'll have to do this connection over here, but we'll do that as we start to remove all of these bolts from this water pump. Now when we're doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay them out inside of this new water pump so I can keep track of where each one of the bolts goes. They are different lengths, so I'm just trying to make note of that. Next, I am going to have to remove the upper bolt for the alternator. It is a T50. I'll go ahead and get that one off, and that should be all of the bolts for the water pump, other than that last hose connection. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the water pump off. Everything looks nice and clean inside of there, which is good. Not a lot of rust. I was kind of expecting to see the cooling system having sat for a while, but everything's nice and clean. Here's the old water pump. I'll have to switch over that hose piece, but as you can see, I've got my new water pump with all the bolts in it, so I know where they go. I'll switch over that hose piece and I'll move all those bolts over, and I can go one by one back into the engine block. I'll get my new gasket installed onto the block, and then we will be ready to install the water pump. All right, I've got my water pump back in. I'll go ahead and I'll reconnect the lower radiator hoses, the upper radiator hose. I've got this connection secured with both clamps. I'll go ahead and put my bracket back on, and we'll go ahead and get everything back together. Quick note about these new water pumps. My bracket bolts that go in right here, they don't have threads already installed on them, so you have to use the existing bolts or a tap to make the correct threads for the bolts. One of the things you want to keep in mind when doing this job is like those hose clamps up there and also that hose clamp right here. You want to make sure that you have them oriented in a way that they're not making contact with the pulley or with the belt, because that can cause premature wear on your belt or on the pulley and cause a little bit of damage in the future. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull vacuum from the reservoir, make sure everything's nice and tight, do a quick leak test, and then fill it all back up. All right, so I've got vacuum pulled on the reservoir. I'm gonna let it sit here for a little bit. If you hear air leaking, it's coming from this hose connection right here. It's just not the tightest, but we'll keep an eye on it for 15 to 20 minutes and we'll go from there. All right, we've let the vacuum sit for a little while. Everything looks good. We're gonna go ahead and get it filled up. All right, we've got our coolant reservoir filled. We've got everything reassembled, and we'll go ahead and give it a start. All right, so we've got the water pump installed and repaired. I will have to order a tensioner to get that pulley nice and quiet, and then I'm also gonna look into getting the bearing replaced for the supercharger pulley. So there's definitely more videos to come on this car. Something I wanna ask, and I want you to leave a comment down below, is do you wanna see me doing these videos detailed step by step? Or would you rather see me doing a round of repairs and then going through and taking a look and seeing how everything does after one big update? Let me know what you guys think down below. I really appreciate how much the channel has grown recently. It's already way bigger than I ever thought it was gonna be. Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.